Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this panel about transitioning into entrepreneurship. Like Bianca said, my name is Sam Constance. I work in Alumni Career Development. Our goal is providing resources, programs, networking opportunities, all the things that will help you grow in your career and help you make a pivot potentially into being your own boss, which is what we're going to be talking about today. The goal of this session is to learn from some alums who are in the process of doing it or who have done it themselves so that you don't have to repeat some of the same mistakes that they might have, so that you can learn from some of their stories. And hopefully this will help you in whatever comes next for you. So this is going to be casual, conversational, and we want to make sure that your questions get answered during this session. So please, at any point throughout the next hour, use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom control panel and shout out any questions that you have for our panelists on the line, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. I'm going to turn it over to our panelists here to do a quick introduction to themselves, and then we're going to dive into some moderated Q&A. So Brian, I will start with you, and then we'll go to Teresa, and then Aaron. Share a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your entrepreneurship journey, where you are right now.
Sure, great, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Foltz. I'm a Chicago Booth 1997 graduate. I live in Sedona, Arizona, and my entrepreneurial experience actually began as an intrapreneurial experience. So working for a company called IXL back in the .com days, I put my UChicago education to use and wrote a business plan that said my company should open up an operation in Tokyo, Japan. And they said, sure, let's do it as long as you're willing to go do it. And so I was employee number one, and that was really my first taste of being an entrepreneur. Since then, I have become a franchisee, first with 1-800-GOT-JUNK, now with Sir Grout, and I have 4 different markets around the country that I've owned with a partner of mine. And then I also started a consulting business in 2008, providing sales and marketing related strategy work for mid-market and enterprise clients. So that's my story thus far.
Well, my name is Teresa Ging. I'm the owner of Sugar Bliss. We are a retail bakery in downtown Chicago, located next to the Palmer House Hilton. I went to University of Chicago, graduated in 2000 with an econ and stat degree. Probably wondering how I got from there to baking. I actually did about 6 years of finance. Started my career at Bear Stearns in investment banking in Chicago. Then I did a couple years at GTCR, which is a private equity firm that was run by our former governor. And then I ended up my last couple years at Credit Suisse doing equity research, covering everything from food service to packaged food, HR consulting. So I did a lot of different industries, not realizing I was going to go into food. Actually how I got in this, one long day, a friend of mine, we all have long days of work. A friend of mine was sifting powdered sugar, making cupcakes, and that was my aha moment. Left the finance world, enrolled in pastry school in Paris at Le Cordon, jumped on a flight, went there, did about a 2 to 3 month pastry program, and then came back to Chicago and started looking for retail space, business planning. That was in 2007. And then in 2009, I opened the first Sugar Bliss retail store in downtown. And then I opened my second store in 2015. And then before COVID, I decided to downsize just to one store so that I could do another growth initiative. So we are launching the wholesale cookie line in 2022 through mass retailers. So we're actually going to be in a major retailer in Chicago starting in 22. So that's a little background about myself.
I guess in the last one, I'm Aaron Gantz. I was the class of 2012, started in the class of 2013, graduated a bit early. Started in my life as an opera singer and wanted to go into the media world, and then enrolled in what was then CCIB, what is now the Trot Business Program. So got a core fundamentals in business, then immediately went to London Business School to get my business degree. Started in international media, buying and selling TV shows, producing content, helped launch sports channels. I was also on the team that helped launch the predecessor to Disney Plus in Europe and Africa. Similar to Brian's story, I was kind of like a corporate entrepreneur. Like I was in corporate finance, but every single time I was kind of putting myself out there doing cool strategic consulting projects internally, doing different things, organizing data, automating processes, making things better within the bigger corporate structure, and kind of build my name for myself doing that. Ended my career there as the head of content strategy and financial planning for Europe and Africa for Fox's international channels. Wanted to move back stateside because I was living in LA for a bit and living in London for a bit, and got a job as a head of FP&A for a travel company. Obviously, luxury travel, sending baby boomers with money to international cruising and COVID, great combination. So pivoted from that into the wonderful world of pharmaceutical health benefits. I'm now the head of finance, was the interim CFO of a startup called CapRx, which I'm wearing their t-shirt, and helped them organize their processes, build out their function, get their Series B raise, build out a team, grow the company from 50 to 350 employees, quadruple our revenue during the pandemic because people need medicine. So I went from travel where people didn't need it to medicines where they did. Very lucky that way. And yeah, love it. Love everything about the startup world. And now I'm a startup exec.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I think what's I'm really excited about is that we have such a variety of industry and experience represented on this panel. And so I want to dive in here. What's interesting is all three of you have had some pretty, there's no standard 9 to 5, but you've had a 9 to 5 in previous lives before moving into starting your own business or before moving into the world of startups. So tell me, what does it mean to make that mindset change? How do you switch from becoming an employee to becoming a business owner, or to how do you know when you're ready? What is involved in that mindset change and then making the switch? And maybe Brian, I'll start with you.
Well, for me, I was working a 9 to 5 job at the time, and we were in a hyper growth mode with the company, but it was an established business. And even though we were very profitable, our metrics were excellent, we were made to feel like we were about to go out of business at any moment. And that really became a grind. And what I saw was I was creating wealth for shareholders and frankly, not creating a whole lot of wealth for me, not for the work, the effort, and the contribution. And that really kind of motivated me to say, you know what, I think I'm ready to take my own personal finances into my own hands and strike out on my own as an entrepreneur and see how that goes, because I want to be responsible for building wealth for myself and my family, et cetera, and just was not liking the dependence on other people's decisions about what my worth was. So that was really what drove me. It was not, like you hear a lot of people say, oh, I want to be my own boss. And I think that might be one of the lesser reasons to jump into entrepreneurism, because it doesn't matter what you do. There's always a boss. So as an entrepreneur, my boss is my clients in my consulting business, and in the franchises, it's, Mrs. Smith down the street, and as a homeowner, one single customer is my boss for that particular job every day. So that's just kind of both sides of thinking about making that jump.
And Teresa, how do you feel like your mindset just kind of switched from the banking world to saying, okay, it's time for me to just launch my own business and I'm going to go it alone?
Yeah, I always thought when I graduated from University of Chicago that I was going to climb that corporate ladder and go back to business school and be a VP, managing director of investment banking. That was always my vision. And then I'm sure most people who have done 2 years of investment banking as an analyst realize very quickly that's not, very few become that position. But I mean, I thought I would still stick around during different finance positions. And I thoroughly did enjoy being in finance. And I used a lot of what I learned to start the business and, operate the business. But for me, it was just, again, I never worked 9 to 5 when I worked in finance. I worked probably 8 a.m. until 1 a.m., 7 days a week. So it was a lot of hours. But I think for me, again, it was just that I was in finance for 6 years, a little burnt out, got passed up for a promotion, and, saw a friend making cupcakes and, was like, kind of like, what is more to life? And so I had another friend that was in equity research, and she was going to business school, and she went to Le Cordon for culinary. And I was like, they have a baking program. I was like, I just need to get out of the States and find myself, and that was in my late 20s at the time. So, I mean, that was kind of like my transition. And a lot of people ask me, like, should I quit my job and start my business? And I'm like, I cannot tell you that, I did, but I mean, again, I gave myself, when I did that transition, I gave myself 1 year. I said, I will, if I don't start a business or find passion in this baking venture, I'm going to go back to finance. And again, I had 6 years of finance, so I had the qualifications. It's not like I was, fresh out of college going to baking and then had no experience. So I knew I could always go back to the corporate world. But again, I can't believe it's been 14 years since I've left it. But that was kind of my transition moment.
That's great. I mean, I love being able to kind of give yourself that timeline for success. And I mean, recognizing you need to meet, set some goals, think about how you're going to measure those goals, but then say, yeah, in a year, I'm going to figure out where I am on those goals and figure out if this is my long-term or if this was just one piece of my career journey.
Yeah, I think my story kind of overlaps with both of my other co-speakers. Obviously, working in a small team, running a global business was very tiring. Never 9 to 5, much more than that. And similarly, I worked my way up and thought I was going to become an executive in one of the big major studios, which is where I was working. And then 1 year Fox was going to buy Warner Brothers, and the next year Disney bought Fox. So the world changed. And so I was also kind of that mindset that no matter what I did, I was making a ton of money for other people. And that made me be a little bit more strategic. So then I figured out where I wanted to be in the world. So I moved to Boston, where I made a life for myself and kind of figured it out. And I love learning. I kind of definitely embraced that UChicago attitude, kind of studying different things, which then pivoted to working in different industries and different sectors and different capacities, and constantly pushing the bounds of what it means. Because like oftentimes when you're in a career trajectory, especially if you go to big corporate, you're specialized in something and you do that thing a lot. One of the things that shocked me the most after my first year of working as an analyst in Fox's studio is I got promoted, and then I was like, oh, what's next? And they're like, you do the same job, just more money to do it. And I'm like, oh, but what about my learning curve? What about more stuff I want to learn, I want to do? And so I kept being attracted to that like faster pace, whether it be M&A or kind of being in the transaction space. And now I was a finance team of 1 in startup world. And now I've grown the team to about a team of 10, but I was doing everything: treasury, state registrations, being the controller, being the FP&A person, being the M&A person, getting a raise, doing the modeling. So I kind of had a hand in everything, which I loved because at a point I was becoming very much that FP&A person. So it enabled me to kind of take on a different, more globalized view and take strategic risks that I wouldn't have been able to do had I stayed in the environment of a bigger concern to begin with. It is a big concern and growing, but at least being able to take those strategic risks and expand what I could do and keep pushing that life of learning forward was very appealing.
I love that. I totally agree. I mean, I think a lot of folks will totally resonate with the fact that being a lifelong learner and continuously pushing yourself is something that's really important to this UChicago community that I've gotten to know. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I also see we've got our 4th panelist on the line here, Craig. Hello, welcome. If you wouldn't mind just quickly introducing yourself and a little bit about where you are in the middle of your startup journey.
I'm Craig Fisk. I'm in San Jose, but I'm currently in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I'm in the middle of doing a second startup. Originally out of Booth, I went to Intel Corporation, which was a great way to learn about the technology industry. And segueing on the whole learning idea, I think for me, the most important thing about a company environment was a place where I could learn a lot. I took my second lowest paying job offer out of business school because I saw it as an environment where I could really learn a lot. It was very flat, and it had a culture that kind of appealed to me as well. But then the first startup that I did really was kind of out of seeing where the industry was going. I was a product manager, then I was a product line manager, and then I was a business unit strategy manager because I was seen as the person that knew a little bit about everything, but not very much about anything. And so I gathered up two other people, an engineering manager and a regional architecture specialist, technical sales specialist. And we started a company. We raised several $1 million in Series A. We ended up recruiting 40 people, pivoted a couple times, got blown out of the water, came out to zero. Never happens in startups. And now I don't know any better. I'm doing another company. So I think learning, and that's the motivation for the current company as well. So it's really applying NLP to networking, because networking seems to be a very important thing today, and it's just very inefficient the way we do it. And I saw an opportunity to learn some new things in the course of doing that. So I really would like to stick on that theme.
That's great. Thanks. And Craig, maybe I'll throw this next question to you. Given that, your various experiences and your years of experience in the world of entrepreneurship and startups, can you tell us a little bit about how it's changed, how it's evolved in the last 10 to 20 years?
It's changed a lot. Actually, there was a product marketing and product management coaching session that Booth did last weekend. And people in one of the sessions were asking me, okay, so since I'm the person who seemed to be the oldest of the group, what did I really see change a lot in the technology industry in my time? And I think the biggest thing in marketing terms is we've shifted from outbound marketing to inbound marketing. Outbound marketing meaning you need to figure out who the customers are, how you're going to reach them, where they're located geographically, how you're going to get there, what do they need for sales collateral, are they in the market, all those kind of things. And inbound marketing meaning more, we want the customers to find us. They're actively looking, they're in the market for a particular product. They need to do SEO, we need to have content, we need to have influencers, et cetera. That's really been a pretty big change, but it really kind of comes down to the efficiency of how do you connect a customer to a particular product that solves some problem that they're looking at. That's the biggest thing that I've seen change. I mean, in the technology industry, of course, we're always thinking in terms of, well, it's like every 18 months that you get twice as many transistors in the world, and how long is it going to take to do X or Y? But the people aspect of it has really, I think, become even more important as we've gotten more technology. I'm not sure that answers your question, but I hope it's a change anyway. Yeah,
totally. And actually, I want to dive a little bit deeper into this question of marketing, because it's huge, getting the word out about the work that you're doing. Maybe Teresa, I'll start with you. You mentioned when we were talking earlier that you did some big guerrilla marketing campaigns to get the word out when you first opened. Can you tell us a little bit about, how do you market from a retail perspective, and what's been successful for you?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as a startup, you don't have a huge budget for marketing. So, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know where I learned this from because I didn't take any marketing classes at University of Chicago. But, I knew that my clientele was going to be corporations because I'd worked in finance. So it was going to be corporations, concierge, whether they're tenant buildings or hotels, and wedding planners. And so, with corporations, I basically, when I started out, just told everyone that I worked in finance, and when, corporations would order a dozen, 2 dozen minis, it's not one person eating it, it's many people eating it. So it's important to have really good packaging, collateral, like brochures, the bag. It's like when people walk down the street, it's just sugar bliss all over it. It's like a walking billboard. But, you know, with the concierge, we do a lot more with tenant buildings versus hotels. But even with hotels, I mean, a lot of them, even with COVID, haven't brought on their pastry department back. So we're like helping them, you know, with VIP gifts. But even tenant buildings, like right now is a big push. We're doing lots of, you know, virtual cookie decorating kits. You know, I have a bunch of Jones Lang LaSalle buildings ordering, you know, holiday events and stuff like that. So, and then, you know, wedding planners, you know, when I first started, I literally went on one of the websites like the Wedding Channel or the Knot, downloaded a bunch of wedding planners, and one of them happened to be Oprah's party planner, Debbie Lilly. And, you know, I basically sent an email out to all the wedding planners with a big cupcake and said, you know, I'd love to sit down and chat with you. And, you know, hopefully, you know, do some business with you and bring some samples. And she was super excited, and she put us on TV a couple times even before the store opened. So,
Wow.
in, you know, hotel concierge, I kind of did the old salesman method. I literally packed a bunch of 4 cupcakes with brochures, walked down the east side of Michigan Avenue, dropped off, introduced myself, sales and concierge front desk, and then the next day to the west side, and that's how we got a lot of house accounts. So you can do a lot of marketing without, you know, paying, especially as a startup. And then, you know, I hired someone to do a copyright of a news press release, and we sent it out to all the major publications right when we opened, and that like cost me $50 at the time. So we got in the Tribune and Daily Candy and a lot of different publications. And, you know, when I first started, there was no social media really. I mean, maybe Facebook, but now there's Instagram, Twitter. We do daily post stories, reels on Instagram, Facebook. You know, it's hard to say like how much sales comes from that, but you know, we do have people that say, I saw your post about hot chocolate bombs on Instagram, and that's why I'm in here. So definitely, if you're a food or consumer package or consumer company, you definitely have to have social media.
That's really helpful. And I imagine along with, you know, all of these marketing pushes, the boots on the ground, just like going for it, you have to be doing a lot of research into the industry. And a lot of the startup culture is about finding your niche and making sure that you really, you know, have a service to provide that folks can't find elsewhere. And I'd love to hear from folks in the room. How did you do that market research ahead of time? How do you prepare, you know, to make sure that you really found your niche? Erin, maybe I'll start with you and in your startup role. Brian, I would love to hear from you too.
Yeah, so I work, my company is working in an industry that is currently an oligopoly for the major players, where it's really unethical, but every single person that walks into a pharmacy pays a different price. And even if you have the same healthcare coverage, you have the same pre-existing conditions, same age, same everything, you might pay a different price because, and most people think that the medicine pricing industry is like the stock market. It fluctuates very drastically. In reality, it doesn't. There's a retail price that gets set when a company rolls out a drug. And then as generic alternatives come on the market, prices usually deflate 4 times a year. But that's not what's being seen in the market. And in addition to that, there's all these brokerages making commissions on selling healthcare benefits and whatever else. So what my company did is we decided to completely bring transparency to a market that had none. So we created a pricing system where we're using the Medicare and Medicaid pricing from what's released by the federal government as the basis of pricing. We got rid of all the spreads in medicine. So if a drug costs $5 or $20,000, doesn't matter. We just charge a flat fee admin. And then there's also a system in the marketplace where if you prioritize certain brand drugs, like for example, if you get Pfizer's vaccine versus Moderna's, Pfizer will give a commission to companies like mine in the traditional space for prioritizing their drug as a treatment. And we give all the money back that we receive in that back to the consumers. We also prioritized a high customer service touch. So in our industry in general, typical NPS scores for the big market players and whatever are probably 15 on the scale of 1 to 100 or negative 100 to 100. Ours is 95. So we actually have a real high touch customer service where if you call us up, you get a pharmacist on the phone. And then on top of that, if that was not enough, in addition to the inefficiencies in the marketplace of actually healthcare servicing, which we're trying to tackle, The technology suite of actually that integration point between pharmacist and consumer is so antiquated. They're still using AS400 systems and COBOL language from like the 80s and 90s. So what we did there is we also built the first enterprise-wide cloud-based solution to solve this problem and also increase their tech suite. So we kind of were playing in 3 different marketplaces, one in the healthcare servicing market, one in the tech market, and one as a payments processor. The reason why we kind of went in that space is because if the federal government ends up regulating PBMs, which we're in, which would bring the entire marketplace to the pricing metrics we would be in, it would kind of starve out the market. So we figured that even in a universe where PBMs like mine didn't exist, there would still be a need for a technological suite upgrade. And we kind of prioritized going the route of kind of having a portfolio effect and going after people where we could deliver real savings. Most of our business is B2B because we're actually doing the plan sponsors, whether it be a hospital or a union or whatever else. So we tried to get a diversified portfolio. We had some very good success getting union business pretty quickly, and then we've expanded from there. So most of our success in marketing has been more on the B2B sales and relationship management, but yeah.
Identifying like major holes and pain
Yes.
points and essentially just
Solving
like,
them.
yeah,
Yeah.
solving. Yeah.
My company's name is CapRx. I'm wearing the polo shirt, but yeah, there's a question about that.
So we got a question about what Aaron's company is. Perfect. Brian, I'd love to turn it over to you. What kind of research do you do into the market to make sure you're filling a niche, and feel free to speak on the marketing topic as well.
Sure. So I'll talk about it like from the franchise perspective first, I think. So, what was interesting about getting into franchises is, I don't have to really come up with a business plan per se. I have to just go execute it and execute it well, but tailor it to the market in which I'm trying to sell. And, even in a franchise environment, you still have to look at pivoting. And so when I started up with 1-800-GOT-JUNK, I bought the territory in Orlando, Florida. And I didn't live there, by the way, at the time, but I moved there and had some personal reasons for needing to be there. So I opened up there, and they're saying, hey, look, this is our operations manual, but we don't know anything about your market. You have to go figure that out. And so now going from the big company world where you're thinking about selling billions of dollars and thinking about markets in just these really large number of zeros, sized metrics, all of a sudden you're thinking about, how do I get one person to call my call center and schedule an appointment for my guys to come out and haul their junk away? And so you really have to do a lot of analysis at just a very local level, finding out things like home ownership percentages, average household income, age of households. And that data actually is reasonably available both through the U.S. Postal Service and from other third parties. So it can be obtained, and you have to put that together to come up with what's your marketing plan going to be. And it's going to be, believe it or not, print's not dead. I mean, everybody keeps saying print's dead, but it's really not, especially the more visual your business is, which my latter franchise system, Sir Grout, is all about a visual result, making your old tile and grout look like new again. So it's very visual, and so print actually works. So then you have to find out what print works. So there's actually only so much analysis you can do, and then you have to go into trial and error mode and try to make changes as quickly as you can. Now, on the digital marketing front, that's beautiful because you can pull levers on that in real time. And so, yeah, we're optimized for SEO purposes, but PPC, oh my gosh, thank goodness I can make changes on that on the fly and, spend more, spend less. Google's not your friend. Sorry if anybody on this call that works for Google, but they'll steal you blind if you'll let them. So you've got to be really careful, or you can burn through a marketing budget before you know what hit you. And that's actually a lesson learned from the consulting side of my business, where once I decided I wanted to really grow that into something substantive, I jumped into PPC advertising and didn't really know what I was doing. And so it's easy to get a whole lot of clicks, but when the clicks don't turn into phone calls, it doesn't matter. And so I had great vanity metrics and nobody picking up the phone to call. And so, you know, you have to learn, you have to pivot. So I've seen that just over and over again when it comes to marketing. Is you can plan all you want, but you've got to, you know, be monitoring your results, you know, as real time as you can, and then make changes to your marketing as quickly as you can, because it's easy to watch 3 months, 6 months, 12 months of your marketing budget, you know, get burned up with really little to no benefit.
That's really helpful. Thanks. And I'll say PPC being pay per click, I'm assuming, just for the folks who are brand new to this world on the line. Craig, you're a marketing guru. Not only are you just great at it, but you're also launching a startup all around marketing. So can you speak a little bit to, sorry, not marketing, networking, I'm saying networking.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to how networking factors into your decision to launch your business and how important it is in being successful? Any tips to build your network as folks are transitioning into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, there's a lot in there potentially. I'll try to keep it brief though. You know, I
We
think
could
one
do
of
a
the
whole
biggest,
hour on this, I know.
yeah, I think one of the biggest things you need to decide coming out of an MBA program is you want to go into a big company or a startup company. And, you know, it sort of depends on what you want your network and your skill set to be. You can really get a network pretty well through being in a big company environment. You want to have lunch with people that are in a different working area, different group, you know, all the time, and have coffee with people, et cetera. Just make sure that you're really building up the network. But in a startup company, you're really sort of wearing all hats. So, you know, it's a skill set development. It's a pretty good thing to do, but nobody's going to call you. Well, I was kind of lucky. I had a McKinsey person call me like 3 years after we started with the previous company. But, you know, if it was after 1 year, I might have gone for it. But not after 3 years, you know, then I was too committed to making everybody successful. So I think that's one issue, is bigger company environment or smaller company environment. I also wanted to throw in here from a marketing perspective, I think it's really important, and Teresa kind of hit on this too, and Brian a different way. It's important to do something that's different than what people expect. You have data on the one hand, it says, you know, who's in the market and why and what do they want to do, but you also want to go for name recognition. We kind of decided to do that with my company is called Marmalade. Well, it doesn't have anything to do with Marmalade, but, you know, it was available as a URL, and it's a little bit unusual. But I think back to Intel, I had an opportunity early on to do a marketing piece that involved a cartoon to explain a product. Nobody did anything like this. It was very much a technology thing. It did product sheets, et cetera. And it was very successful in changing the market share for our product. But like 6 months later, I get this interoffice envelope and it's got Andy Grove's name on it. You know, Andy Grove, the head of the company, had signed it. I thought, oh boy, I got something from Andy Grove. I wonder what it could be. So I open it up and here's the mailing piece, and he'd written on it, who the hell did this? Don't do it again. Because it didn't fit the model of, you know, what was expected in a technology company. I was lucky that I didn't get fired. But, you know, you want to do something that's a little bit unusual, it's going to get unfair amount of attention typically, whatever the industry is that you're in. So I don't know, those two things, big company versus small company, and being a little bit outside the usual path that people are going on.
I like it. Don't be afraid to be a little wacky.
Yeah.
Well, we've got some great questions coming in here, and I want to make sure our audience gets a chance to get their questions answered. So I'm going to just jump right in here with the first one from Helen. How do you manage the high level of uncertainty that comes with entrepreneurship? And then do you have different expectations for yourself, for your productivity level, because you are, you know, the person, you're the business owner, versus when you were an employee, when you were, you know, working for somebody else? Do you have different levels of expectations for yourself? And I will just open this up to anyone. Aaron, I see you came off mute, so please jump right in.
Yeah, so I mean, again, I think that one of the things being in big corporate, but kind of having that ownership mindset from the get-go, I was really bad at that this is your job thing. So I was very suited to, oh, let's do this, let's do that. But it does come with a different level of certainty. Again, like if you were in corporate America, I mean, I was told by my first manager, I was like, this is your career trajectory. This time for this, then this, and this, and this. There's a lot of linearity to it. There's a lot of structure around what your career will be, what the skills you will learn, depending on what that is. And even more than that, having a good mentor that actually gives you that information is really important. But there is a lot of uncertainty in a startup. Is the company going to continue to exist? Hopefully it does. What does the capital markets look like? How does management, if you are in a big corporation, right? Hypothetically, management might change, but it might not. It might be the same person for 20 years. If you're in a startup and you have and you raise money, the board that you're investing in, or that's investing in you might have different decisions about executive core. If you are the founder and you built this thing, you may not have the skills to be a publicly traded CFO or CEO or COO. Oh, you may have never run a business where you have this many employees before, and kind of having those growing pains. You need to be able to adapt, and you need to be able to deal with that uncertainty, which is never comfortable. Again, like I think a lot of us had a universe where the pandemic kind of changed the dynamics of work-life balance when we're all in the home setting and we're all kind of iterating to that. In my case, that didn't really help me in creating proper separation. But yeah, I think you just have to create that balance yourself, because no one's going to tell you, hey, don't do that extra thing to build that thing for the company, or don't take that meeting or whatever else. In that world of uncertainty, the only person that has autonomy in being able to regulate your own uncertainty and dealing with what the situational uncertainty is yourself. Creating healthy frameworks, investing in your mental health, doing what you need to do to continue to have the energy to give what you need for your job.
You want to repeat the question, Sam?
Oh, I see Teresa came off mute. Yeah. So how do you manage that high level of uncertainty?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, Erin, you talked about like setting boundaries, super important, prioritizing your mental health. And Teresa, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, when I left the finance world, I think coming from, a Chinese background, I said this earlier, that my mom was very like, what are you doing? We spent, lots of money on you to go to Chicago to become, a big finance person, not open a restaurant. And so, I mean, again, I had to give myself and my family parameters that, within 1 year, I would either make it big or, go back to finance. And, fortunately, with the good boy, and so, as I said, the first, again, I think whether it's going to University of Chicago or working in finance and investment banking, you have such a strong work ethic that's built up that as an entrepreneur, I really feel like that you have to have a strong work ethic, and you have to be able to wear lots of hats. There are days when I am, helping customers when I have someone that doesn't show up, or, baking if my pastry chef is gone or something like that. Especially with COVID, we're now built up to have 50% of our team, but you have to wear a lot of hats, and you have to be kind of, as we've talked about this, be humble about doing anything that makes your business keep going. I mean, even through COVID, I never once shut down. And I was like, well, I'm just going to lay off my staff, make sure they're on unemployment, and just keep chugging along and make enough money to pay 2 stores rent. And that's just what I had to do. And then slowly build the staff again and come up with different marketing ideas and stuff like that. So I definitely, sorry, I'm at a trade show, so that's the background. But I think that you have to gauge some uncertainty in entrepreneurship and just be like, you just have to jump over that hurdle and keep going. Can't let it knock you down. Otherwise, I mean, you just have to have a tough stomach to keep going. Every day is a different day. I remember building out my first store, and I was like, there were some struggles in opening that store. There were some struggles even getting the first bank loan. I went to, got 3 bank loans. One of them declined me. And I asked the person why, it was a woman at the time. And I said, why did I get declined? And she said, you're too young to start a business and you have no secondary income. And this is back in 2006. And I was like, what do you mean? And I was like 28 at the time. And I was like, secondary income, what does that mean? And she's like, you're not married. And it was a big bank. And I, of course, yeah. I don't know if it's my UFC or working in finance, but I had no time for a lawsuit. I just needed to get the financing. So I found out who was her boss. And, I went to the bank and I said, I'm not looking for just a bank to finance 1 Sugar Bliss, but 2 Sugar Bliss, 500 Sugar Bliss. I got the bank loan the next day. But I ended up going to another bank, the one that actually gave me the loan in the first place. But again, there were times when I wanted to be like, quit, and you're just, as an entrepreneur, you just have to keep chugging along. There is uncertainty, and I would say I'm more productive as my own boss, as myself, as a boss, because I have employees, and employees will look at you and say, if you have a boss that just kind of like dilly-dallies, comes in here and there, it's not, they're going to do the same thing. And so I am very very structured, and I work hard, and my employees work hard too. So I think hopefully I answered all the questions.
Yeah, Brian, I see you come off mute too. Please jump in here.
Well, I think as it relates to risk, it's almost impossible to de-risk your business in a startup mode or in a small entrepreneurial mode, because you can try to have more capital than what your business plan calls for, and you're probably going to burn through that anyways. But when you get a curveball thrown at you like the Great Recession or COVID-19, I mean, there is no way to really de-risk from that. I think Aaron said it well, that you've got to be able to find ways to give yourself some mental relief. For me, I mountain bike Tuesday and Friday mornings and trail run on Wednesday morning and hike on Saturday morning, and things like that, and that keeps me sane. But I remember when I was interviewing with 1-800-GOT-JUNK's Fran Dev people back in 2005, the day's going great. This one woman says to me, she's like, okay, so I've seen your 3-year business plan. What happens if you don't hit your number for year 1? And I'm kind of like, why would you even ask that? Like, I know what I'm doing. Of course I'm going to go and be successful. Like, how can you even challenge me to that, right? And then I was like, well, I guess I'll, look at my numbers and I'll figure out how to pivot as needed and, change what I'm doing. She's like, okay, well, what happens if you don't hit your number after year 2? And I'm like, well, I really don't think that's going to happen, And mind you, this is in 2005. So my year 1 ended at the end of 2006, and my year 2 ended at the end of 2007. And Florida was already going into the tank, economically. So what she was just hypothetical, but she was prophetic all the way. And I ended up having 5 trucks when I only needed 2. And it was all we could do to keep the lights on through the Great Recession. And I mean, there was no way to de-risk that. The only thing I could have done would have been to mail the keys back and default on my loans. And that's not how we roll. And that's not what I wanted to do. So, you just have to be able to find those outlets to work through it. Yeah, have a mentor, have people to talk to. Don't capitalize only to the penny that you think you're going to need, because there's no way you can forecast how much capital you're going to need. It will always be more. You're always going to be optimistic. You're going to have your conservative, most likely, and optimistic cases, and even the conservative ones optimistic in hindsight.
You also have to be able to iterate, because there's no room for sunk cost analysis when you're in a startup. Like, again, if you make a decision, iterate, change it, fix it. If you want to roll out a system, don't wait, because there's always going to be a choice, right? Do I do this massive integration? Do I not? Do I do this massive product launch and invest in software developers and product managers and everything to build it? Do I buy it? There's always going to be a decision tree with everything in startup. Do I do this initiative or do I do that? It's always, because you have finite resources. You're not going and doing infinite things yet. And if you are, great, then you don't have to make those strategic decisions, but it's always a series of decision trees. Do you make this decision or that one? What do you do to maximize your opportunities where you're currently standing, with the resource you have available? And as much like what Brian was saying about how he had to pivot and having his reforecasting for got junk, it's the same thing. Like, again, if you have a financial forecast that doesn't work, iterate it, change it, take your medicine and repivot as quickly as you can, just so that you, like, even just from your own level setting, okay, well, we bought 5 trucks, great. Okay, that we shouldn't have done that in hindsight, but let's not buy 5 more, right? Like, let's not say, oh, we need to have 10 trucks because we need some branding or whatever. If you don't have the capacity for 10 trucks, don't buy more. Don't, like, do what you need to do. Don't keep those 5 trucks because you just need them. If you don't need them, sell them, right? Like, so making the next decision on the current set of circumstances becomes a lot more prevalent when you're in a startup and you have hyper growth, or you're making decisions on a much quicker basis, and you also have higher stakes.
It's a great skill to be able to learn in the world of entrepreneurship and elsewhere, just to be able to roll with it and learn to iterate. So we've talked a lot, we danced around the idea of resources. We heard from Teresa about her experiences with a bank loan. We did get a question from someone on the line here about just raising capital. I'd love to hear from folks, how did you raise the capital to make your move? Yeah. And tell us what that process looks like.
Well, I can talk a little bit about that. I was kind of lucky when we started out that, first of all, it was 3 people who had worked together and knew who each other were at Intel. It's really important to have a team. It's really, I don't know if you guys have had experience with this, but you need to have people that balance your proclivities, I guess is what it comes down to. And I tend to be fairly unrealistic and always looking for the, well, what's the biggest thing that we can do? So I have as my CTO currently a person who's probably just the opposite of that, extremely practical, very realistic. And that was the case with the previous startup as well. But in terms of fundraising, with the previous company, I raised classic Series A, top drawer venture capital. And it took going to probably 50 to 100 different firms, mostly in the Bay Area, but also in New York and Boston and Seattle. And I, in retrospect, I'm trying to do this company as bootstrap. We're all into it for bootstrapping because it just takes so much time raising venture capital. I mean, you hear stories about, somebody got lucky, the first person they pitched or whatever. But you also hear the Airbnb story or the Uber story. What they pitched originally was totally different than what it ended up being as a business. And so it just takes a lot of time going the venture capital route. In terms of bank loans, what Teresa was saying, I can really relate to that. We probably were a little bit too unusual. We weren't going to get a bank loan. But for, a bakery kind of thing, you would expect that you could do that. It's something that people can relate to. And in Brian's case, it's something you could build up gradually over time. I think, I'm putting words in everybody's mouth here a little bit. What we were trying to do with the previous company was really sell companies that had bought a similar product before, and they just wanted to get something that was faster, better, cheaper. With the new company, the networking and applying NLP to networking, we don't know, because I know that I get dozens of emails every day, emails on LinkedIn, people offering to do various things for me that are totally irrelevant. And so is it going to work to connect people together if they have exactly the same, matching skill set? Are they going to be willing to talk to people that they don't know? It's kind of like saying, would you read a book by an author you don't know? Well, I guess so. If it's relevant, well, maybe the same thing applies to networking too. I would work with somebody I don't know. So you have to be a little bit unrealistic, but have, matching skills from other people that are working with you. I think that's important. And I would do that ahead of, fundraising. We were lucky when we started out. Sorry, I'll say a little bit too much about this, but we had 2 really good coaches. One person had been an engineering VP and co-founder of Metagraphics, which sold to Siemens about 3 years ago now for a fair amount of money. It was one of the top 2 computer-aided design firms. And he basically said, let me know when you're ready, when you've got your prototype, and I'll introduce you to Dave and Dave at Greylock and Venrock and Sutter Hill. We thought, oh, great, we'll do that. Well, of course, none of them were actually interested in what we were doing, but it was still a good learning experience. I had another person who was a coach who had been a CPA and had worked as a consultant for several venture firms. And he was really good for reviewing stuff as well. Still, it took, like 50 to 100 different company visits to learn who was in the market, what was going to be interesting in the venture capital realm. That's the classic one that you always hear about. But if you can find another way to do it, I would do that.
Another piece about the funding in different capacities is people really raise for different reasons. Some people just want the money. Some people need, but a lot of times, depending on how much you raise and if you need it or don't need it, it can really impact the relationship you have with the board and the investors and that community, because obviously people are investing for an ROI. They're not investing to be cut for a charity. And if they are, they're investing for a different reason. So especially in a market where things are moving, if you have the luxury of options, I know that when Teresa was saying she went to one bank, got a loan, and then immediately ended up working with a different partner because of a number of reasons that she in her decision making. Like, you want to make sure that you strike the right balance of the money you're getting and the relationship that you're getting with them. Because you're obviously, if you're going to go for a raise, you're going to lose some of your ownership in the company. You're going to have an advisor that's going to be making decisions that may run counter to what you want to do or maybe aligned. So you want to make sure that you find people that are strategically aligned with the vision that you're trying to create. If that's a motivation, if you just want to build and sell, then that's a different whole motivation that goes to a whole different set of entrepreneur personalities. But raising for its own sake is one thing. Raising because you need it. Are you raising for a strategic purpose? Are you raising for a build purpose or an M&A purpose? The reasons behind and what kind of company you're setting and what kind of partnership you want to have in that market can also dictate the investment routes. Do you want more of the traditional investment banking? Do you want more venture? Do you want private equity? A lot of different avenues and different investment strategies can also dictate what you should or shouldn't do when going for a raise.
I just saw Sam, your little thing, but again, the first store I went with a bank loan. The second store, and both stores were empty concrete boxes, so I had to do a lot of build out. So the second store, well, fortunately, the first store, I did a 6-year term loan, and I was able to pay it back within 3 years. And then the second store, which ended up being 7 years later, I had a different LLC. So the first store funded the second store. So still no investors. And then I just paid off that loan pre-COVID to my first business. And then now that we are growing to the wholesale business, and that's a whole different animal where it's like, possibly a manufacturing facility, co-packers, all that good stuff. I am looking for investors. And as Aaron said, I'm looking for an investor, not just for capital. I'm looking for someone that has the knowledge in the CPG industry that can help us grow to more retailers than the one that we already have a contract. So again, I never thought I was going to have an investor. And I've, for the last 14 years, I've been the only person. But as you grow to a different type of business, you will, this is a whole different area that I don't know. And I need that person if I want to do it correctly. Or it could be multiple investors, but I am looking for someone that is not just the money, it's also the knowledge.
A partnership. Yes. I think that's a really great piece of advice. And actually on that front, we're going to do our last question here, and I'm going to give each one of you a minute to answer, or maybe 30 seconds. And I love this question from Leah. She says, stealing from Brene Brown, what's one piece of advice that you absolutely must share because it's awesome, or a piece of advice that you received that is so awful and you need to warn everyone not to take it? And feel free, whoever wants to come off mute and jump in first. This will be our last question of the day. Not all at once, though, seriously.
Too many things all at once.
Teresa, go for it.
Well, I would just say is that, you know, if you have a passion to do something, I didn't know I was going to open a bakery when I was in Chicago undergrad. You know, I never even baked for all, like, ever. So if you have I had a passion to start something and I didn't know what it was. I mean, try it out, start it as a hobby. It may not work out and you didn't invest too much money, you know, and if it grows into $1 million plus company, then great, you know. I will also say, I mean, there are going to be your ups and downs. You know, every day is a different day as an entrepreneur, and you have to be able to weather those ups and downs. And so you just have to have a thick skin to keep going.
I think the one thing I would say is network. You need to network to find people, to find investors, to, bounce ideas off people, to find out what you're wrong about, which is probably most things. So it's really important to talk to other people. Data is important too, but network is an important part.
Brian,
I would say make sure you really know yourself. Understand what your tolerance is for risk and uncertainty, and ask other people that know you well what their opinions are of your ability to be resilient through all the ups and downs that everybody has spoken about. And it also includes understanding, your own humility, because as Teresa talked about, you never know from one day to the next what hat you might have to wear. That's really true. And as an entrepreneur, you don't usually have a whole staff of people to serve your needs. You got to be prepared to do it all yourself and be humble about that. So make sure you really understand yourself well before you jump into this.
Yeah, I guess I'll say that one, you can be many personality types and become an entrepreneur or work for one. You can also, and kind of going into that line of your level of risk tolerance, are you the type that can just throw caution to the wind and become one of those people in a garage joining Microsoft? Are you someone that needs a bit more stability? Like for me, I need to be in a company in a role where they actually can afford to hire a head of finance, right? I'm not the type right now that can afford to jump in and be one of those Microsoft people, except if I'm doing it in my free time in my backyard or whatever else as a side hustle. Some people do have that. And then some people need a little bit more stability than being the first finance head. They want to be on a Series B company or a Series C level companies. But there's a lot of roads and a lot of entry points and a lot of ways you can still contribute with a lot of different skill sets. You don't have to be a CFO. You don't have to be a CEO or marketing person. There are a lot of different needs. There's software engineers, there's product people, they are corporations. So eventually they're going to need a little bit of everything. The other thing that I would give as a piece of advice, if you are joining someone else's company, make sure you understand if you're getting equity, what that means, not just in terms of the number of shares, but percentage of equity in the company and strike prices and things like that, because a lot of things can vary, especially if it's illiquid. I mean, salary is a salary, bonus is a bonus. Equity is probably the thing that has the most volatility, but also the most upside. So you want to make sure that it's aligned with what your expectations are. Obviously, the later stage that you enter an institution, probably the less you're going to get. But it's great to say, oh, you have 1 million shares, but 1 million shares of zero is zero. So going back to that uncertainty question, make sure you have a little bit of understanding of what that will translate, what that means in terms of dilution perspectives and everything else. Yeah.
Well, we've had some great actionable advice, some great stories. I'm really, really thankful for the 4 panelists that we have on the line today for being candid with us and sharing a little bit about your experiences. My colleague Bianca has dropped a link in the chat here to a survey. I want to hear from you. What did you love about this event? Any kudos you have for our presenters? What more do you want from the University of Chicago? How can we help you grow in your career? And as you take your next step, which I'm assuming a lot of you are, given that you're here, how can you turn to University of Chicago to help? Let us know. Brian, Teresa, Aaron, and Craig, thank you so much. We're really grateful for your time. And to everyone on the line, we'll look forward to seeing you in the next Career Month event.
Thanks for your question, Sam. Good.
Have a good one.